Dudes, when you're first starting out on the bass, and even sometimes if you're not just starting out, dialing in the perfect, like, fat, thick, juicy bass tone can actually be quite tough. And there are a ton of mistakes that you can make along the way that will ultimately make your tone sound awful. In this video, you're going to learn exactly what the 10 worst bass tone fails are and specifically how to fix them. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Hey, it's Scott Devine here from scottsbasslessons.com, helping you take your bass playing to the next level. And on this channel, we focus on one thing and one thing only. We focus on bass. We do YouTube tutorials, we talk about gear and everything in between. So if you are new here, make sure that you slap that subscribe button down below. Yo, super quick, I just wanted to let you know that if you are a beginner just starting out on the bass guitar, we've actually created this free guide for you. It's called A Simple Guide to the Different Parts of the Bass Guitar. And if you look at it, it'll show you all of the different parts of the bass guitar that you need to memorize and know. So you can print it out, blow it up, put it on your wall, and you can have it there for reference. Now, if you want to grab that, again, it's totally for free. The link is in the description. With that said, let's get back to the lesson. So first up is that I want you to make sure that your nails are cut short enough, okay? Because if one of your nails or both nails are too long, you're going to get a real brittle sound, and you really want that fat tone. So make sure that your nails are cut short enough that they're not catching on the strings. Now, for whatever reason, if you do want to have nails, there are a few bass players out there that do use it as part of their technique, but I say few, I mean very few. To get a fatter sound, you can rotate the hand around like this, so you're using more of the side of the finger. It's just something you can practice, but definitely make sure that those nails aren't catching on the strings. Now, next up is using rest strokes as your primary plucking stroke instead of free strokes in your plucking hand, okay? So let's just define what a rest stroke and a free stroke is, okay? So a rest stroke is when you pluck the string and the finger falls into the string beneath it, okay? So here, I'm plucking a C on the A string and the index finger falls into the E string after I've plucked it. A free stroke is where you play up, like this, okay? Where the finger doesn't rest on the string below and actually moves into free air. So with the rest stroke, you are going to generally get a thicker sound. And if you're a beginner, I would get that technique down first. Sure, when you become more advanced, you can experiment with that free stroke. There are some players that do use free strokes, but that rest stroke is just such a fundamental part of your bass technique. You need to focus on it and get it down. It'll really help your tone. Now, the next tone fix may be obvious, but so many people make this mistake. We've got to get changing our strings more regularly because it really has a huge impact on the sound of your instrument and your tone, okay? Just as a benchmark, if you're just starting out, you want to be changing your strings every quarter, so every 3 months. But if you're really shedding it, try and get a new set on every month. And it really will make a difference to your bass tone. So whilst we're on the topic of strings, getting the correct strings for what the tone that you're aiming for, that's our next tone fix, okay? Because we've got round wounds, we've got flat wounds, we've got light, medium, heavy gauge strings, we've got nickel strings, we've got steel strings. Oh, this is getting out of hand. It's pretty overwhelming. For round wound strings, which is what these are, and if you've got round wounds, you can, they've got the winds around the string, okay? For round wounds, you've got two main types, nickel strings and steel strings. Now, in terms of gauge, the gauge means how thick the strings are. These are medium gauge. You can also get light and you can also get heavy and some variations in between. Honestly, just go for a medium gauge. And again, there is a tonal difference between some of them, but it's very minimum. And if you're just starting out on bass, you're not going to be able to hear it. Don't worry about it, okay? Now, what will make a difference is round wounds versus flat wounds. As I said, these are round wounds and these sound like this. Let's hear what that sounds like on flat wounds. So these are flat wounds, and as you'd expect, they're completely smooth, which is why they're called flat wounds. These have a much more old school, kind of duller tone in general. So if you are a huge fan of James Jamerson, the Motown sound, all of that old school vibe of tone, then you might want to experiment with some flat wounds on your bass. Now the next bass tone fix isn't really a tone fix, but it's just something that drives me crazy, so I had to add it in because there's so many beginners that don't do this. It drives me crazy, okay? Next up is just tune your bass every single day, okay? You can use a pedal or a clip-on tuner, and frankly, you should be able to tune your bass using, the age-old techniques of harmonics or the fifth fret to the open string. I'm not going to do that in here, I'll do that in another video, but yeah, tune your bass every day, because if you're not, you can put all of your effort into getting a great bass tone. If your bass is not in tune, you might as well sack it off. Another thing, the next bass tone fix is fretting notes correctly. Even though it's commonly said that you need to fret the note in between the two frets. Okay, so say for instance we want to fret this one here, okay, we actually don't want to do it here. We want to be doing it right behind the fret, almost on top of the fret, but just a little bit back, okay? If you watch me play a scale, I'm playing almost on top of the frets. I'm not playing it like this, which is in between the frets, because what happens is it's going to take more pressure to push it down to actually sound the note, and you are way more likely to get buzzing and all of the stuff that you do not want. You don't want that to be part of your tone if it's not intentional, okay? So make sure that you're fretting the notes intentionally and correctly. So the next bass tone fix is to learn about your pickups. You've got to learn how to dial in the tones. Now, if you're on a P bass, it's actually really simple because you've got a split humbucker, okay, split humbucker, and you've got a volume, we all know what that does, and you've got a tone, okay? That is it, you can't really go wrong. So there's no sort of you can't select any of the pickups, okay? But if it was on a jazz bass, like this, okay? So when you've got a jazz bass or many other, but like any bass with two pickups, any bass with two pickups, right? You've got a neck pickup, you've got a bridge pickup, and you can use both as well. So you can generally use the neck pickup on its own soloed, bridge pickup on its own soloed, and both together, okay? Now, if you're using the neck pickup on its own, it's going to give you a fatter sound. Than the bridge pickup, okay, which is on its own. So this is all about learning about your tone. Now you've also got both of them on together, which will give you just a completely different sound. Now, whilst we're on the topic of pickups, we also need to figure out and learn what our controls do. And this is the next bass tone fix, okay? Learn your controls. Obviously, we all know what volume does. Okay, now on this bass specifically, we've also got a blend, okay? So what this does is, for instance, this here, I can either have this pickup on or this pickup on or both pickups on, and it's this control that does that, okay? Now this bass is an active bass as well, so it's gonna have a treble control, a middle control, and a bass control. If you want more bottom end to the sound, you boost the bass. If you want more of that top end of the sound, you boost the treble. And if you want more mid, that sound, then you boost the mid. But you really need to understand and experiment with your controls. Just set your EQ flat and then learn from there. Don't go crazy. Use this stuff like you do like spices and salt on your food, right? A little bit goes a long way. Now, whilst we're on the topic of learning your controls and your EQ on here, same thing goes for the amp, okay? This is the next bass tone fix. you need to understand how to use the EQ on your amp. And again, if you're just starting out, just go everything at 12 o'clock. That's flat, okay? So I'm just gonna do that on this amp, everything at 12 o'clock. And obviously, you know, we know what volume does. So the bass is at 12. I've got a low and high mid on mine. You might only have a mid on yours and then treble. And that's like a great neutral sound. Now, if anything, and this is something I regularly do, I'm gonna boost the bass a little bit. I'll boost the bass maybe to 2 o'clock, and then I might, if I've got a low mid, just boost that to about 1 o'clock. And really, for me, that's where I'm gonna stay. Okay, it's just a real nice fat sound. But again, this comes down to, on your part, experimenting and just learning about it. Now, I have got one more for you, but before we even get to that, it's time for question of the day. So which one of these tone fails that we've gone through so far have you specifically suffered with in the past? What I want you to do is let me know in the comments, and also, have I missed any? If I have, please put them in the comments so the rest of the community can check out the comments and learn from your experience as well. So the last bass tone fix I want to focus on today is the plucking hand, because this is such a critical part of your tone and really just gets ignored for the most part. Everybody's worrying about, you know, am I playing the right scale? Am I playing like a cool lick? You know, but they're not thinking about the tone of it and specifically how that can be dialed in with this hand. First up is that this hand shouldn't be static. It should be moving around the bass to give you different tonal variations of the stuff that you're trying to play, okay? If you want to get a real tight sound, you want to be over here over the bridge pickup. If you want a fatter sound, with a more of a kind of like that raspy kind of, then you want to be over the neck pickup here, okay? So tighter sound, fatter sound, with a more of a clanky vibe to it. Now, one more thing I want to mention before we wrap up is the actual pressure that you strike the string with, okay? Because some people just don't play hard enough. They play really lightly, which is great in certain circumstances, but you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that vibe if you're. On the flip side, you can play too hard as well. So really, you need to spend the time dialing that in, and you'll just be able to experiment at home. You know, it's not too loud. It's obviously not too loud. It's. You know, it's just dialing that tone in so you can really get it to sing, and you've got like a lot of tonal variations as you move in the whole thing. It's just, this hand is like golden when it comes to playing bass. I always say to my students, this is the one that takes you on the journey. It's like, you know, it's taking you on the journey. This is the engine though. This is going to get you there. So it's really this thing that's driving the car. Now, if you've enjoyed the content in this video, make sure that you slap that like button down below and subscribe if you're not already. And I've also got 2 more super cool things for you, and both of them are free. First up is my completely free Bass Players Toolkit that you can grab via the link in the description below, and it includes loads of really fantastic video resources like how to get your bass set up, you know, truss rods and stuff like that, because if you're just starting out on bass, you really want to make sure that your bass is playing correctly and you're not fighting against it. That is the worst, okay? And it also, I go into more stuff about tone. I talk about how to get started with the modes and theory and all of that cool stuff, right? So if you fancy that, again, the link is in the description. It is totally free. And secondly, which is another thing that's totally free, is a 14-day free trial to Scott'sBassLessons.com, which is the ultimate learning platform for bass players just like you. Scott's Bass Lessons has the largest and coolest video course library on the planet. It is essentially your chance to study with the best bass players on the planet from the comfort of your own home. Now, both of the links for those are down below. Again, both are free. And with that said, take it easy, and I'll see you next time in the shed.